Pack your things. Is that a live look at George Pickens? Yeah, there's the Cowboys on the U-Haul as he's heading to Pittsburgh. Jerry Jones warned us pre-draft that they were working on pretty substantial trades, and true to his word, the Cowboys making waves today, acquiring wide receiver George Pickens from the Steelers. Pittsburgh getting a pair of picks, including a third-rounder next year. Let's bring in Adam Schefter with much more details. Shefty, why were the Steelers willing to make this trade now in early May?
Well, Kevin, we usually don't get mammoth-sized trades in May, but that's exactly what happened this morning. And the Pittsburgh Steelers have been open to dealing George Pickens throughout the course of the offseason. I think from the moment they acquired DK Metcalf, that made that trade even more likely and feasible for them to do. Now, they did not go and use a high draft pick on a wide receiver during the draft, but they continued to have conversations with interested teams in George Pickens' services. And Dallas all along have been tracking him. Dallas had been checking in on any number of veteran wide receivers across the league, seeing who might be available to acquire. Eventually, the Cowboys landed on George Pickens, who the Pittsburgh Steelers were happy to move on from prior to the last year of his contract. Now, again, the upside for Dallas is the talent, the vast skills. The people in the Steelers organization say that George Pickens is as talented as any wide receiver in football. But the downside is he is that great, but they were willing to deal him despite the fact that he had 1 year left on his contract, in a clear signal that they were not going to re-sign him. And so they move him to Dallas, which gives up essentially a third-round pick and a pick swap. And if George Pickens leaves Dallas after the season, then Dallas would recoup a compensatory draft pick potentially as well. So it's a low-risk investment for the Dallas Cowboys. The Pittsburgh Steelers move on, but you heard Brooke Pryor talk about the confidence that the Steelers have in this current group of wide receivers who, if we look at the list, after DK Metcalf, there seem to be a lot of questions at this time, but nobody's drafted and developed wide receivers much better than the Pittsburgh Steelers through the years. There's the list of receivers: Robert Woods, Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, Scotty Miller. Not exactly a murderer's row of wide receivers that the Steelers, but nevertheless, they feel like they're ready for the season ahead, Kevin.
Good context there, Shefty. Thank you so much. And Roman Wilson's one of those guys. They feel like he could have a bright future. Did not play his rookie season. As we take a look at the Steelers in a very busy offseason for their skill position players, they traded for DK Metcalf in March, signed Mason Rudolph as he comes back, 2-year deal. And then a really sneaky good move for them. They go with an Iowa running back, and they're always really good. And then Caleb Johnson coming in the third round in addition to Pickens. The Steelers also lost their leading passer and rusher from last season, Russell Wilson and Najee Harris. Let's bring back our guys, and that is Lewis and Sam, as well as Graziano and Schefter standing by. Lewis, does it make sense right now, after all the things you've heard, for the Steelers to have this split here specifically with George Pickens and move on when they need so much talent on the offensive side?
Look, there comes a point in time, Kev, where, look, it's just not a tenable situation anymore. They just feel as though that the talent does not warrant them tolerating whatever issues that the player was causing. And they just say, hey, look, it doesn't really matter what it looks like on paper. To us, we feel as though this could potentially be, quote unquote, an addition by subtraction type of situation. And hey, they get to see guys on their football team like Calvin Austin. They get to see guys like Roman Wilson now here in the offseason, being the fact that he missed all of his rookie season in 24 with that hamstring injury. They get to see them a lot more than we do. So maybe Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith really do feel as though, hey, look, we'll be able to make do. It may not look exactly the same. Yeah, George Pickens is a wonderful talent. But when we look at it in its totality, this is what's better for the football team. Although everyone who is a fan of the Steelers and everyone who studies the Steelers from the outside looking in goes, this does not make sense, especially considering the situation at quarterback.
But what does make sense could be the immaturity piece. What George Pickens has shown on film is that George Pickens is immature, at least at times. There'll be times where you'll see the acrobatic catches, but times where he doesn't show up, or times where he doesn't run the right route, or times where he actually shows up to the game 90 minutes before. You should show up 3 hours before. You're required to be there 2 hours before. And so the immaturity piece could be the reason why the Pittsburgh Steelers said, let's move on from George Pickens. Then you say, okay, well, what do we do now? Where do we go? Well, there's still players like Keenan Allen, who is available currently as a free agent, who has produced over the entirety of his career. And so, yes, there's this idea of, okay, what do we go to now? But it could be the guys on the roster, guys like Roman Wilson, who was drafted last year, or you could go to free agency and pick up a key free agent. Keenan Allen being one of them. You're seeing on the screen, Gabe Davis just got released today. Amari Cooper. There are options now that George Pickens is no longer on your roster. So the talent is there, but the level of maturity wasn't.
You heard Adam mention that the Cowboys were in touch with several different teams about several different wide receivers. That means there's some players out there that you can still trade for. And the Steelers, armed with some extra draft picks now, could certainly engage a team like, let's say, the Green Bay Packers, who drafted a couple guys and have some guys who are entering the final year of their contracts. So the player acquisition phase, as Mike Tomlin says repeatedly, lasts all year, and the Steelers may not be done adding, they may not be done trading.
Lewis, on paper, okay, listen, and Shefty brought up a great point. I think you mentioned it as well. We're not there every day, so we don't know about the talent that this coaching staff sees on the field. But on paper, in May, are we staring at the worst offense in the Mike Tomlin era in Pittsburgh? I mean, like especially without Aaron Rodgers on the roster yet.
Well, we're definitely staring at one that right now it doesn't have a proven track record in terms of the individual components, outside of really DK Metcalf, that would lead you to believe that they can compete with some of the offenses that they're going to be faced with in their own division, because that's where it starts. I mean, this offense as it's presently constructed, that's not going to be able to match up and go blow for blow with Baltimore. It's not going to match up and be able to go blow for blow with Cincinnati. And I would argue this, especially when you're talking about the quarterback position, as it's presently constructed. Would you rather have Pittsburgh's quarterback room, or would you rather have the quarterback room that right now, as it's presently constructed, that the Cleveland Browns have? I would take the Cleveland Browns quarterback room 100 out of 100 times. And that's something that I'm sure as a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, you're sitting there going, that is something I would never imagine that I would say.
No.
And see, that's a problem. That's a problem. So, yeah, they have work to do. And look, I believe in Mike Tomlin. I'll tell you what, if Mike does believe, and look, I know people talk about this all the time, that the player acquisition phase is a 12-month-a-year proposition. It is. Well, they're going to need all 12 of them. They're going to need right up to the Saturday before the Week 1 game, because they have a lot of work to do still.
Shefty, you want to jump in on this?
Well, again, I think the Cleveland Browns' potential starting quarterback is a guy that the Pittsburgh Steelers moved on from in Kenny Pickett. And the Pittsburgh Steelers also have amassed extra draft capital for the draft in 26 in Pittsburgh. So, yes, Lewis is correct. Today, Cleveland's quarterback room might be more appealing and attractive, but I think Pittsburgh also is setting up for the future, as is Cleveland. There's an arms race between those two teams aimed at the draft in 2026 that'll be held in Pittsburgh, where the Browns right now are scheduled to have 2 first-round draft picks. That's the subplot to the start of this upcoming season.
All right. Cannot wait to see how this continues to develop here. Again, we're only in May, but the idea that the Browns have a better quarterback room than the Steelers, that's